Welcome to Binger, Oklahoma, and I am currently in the Johnny Bench Museum, and this is my tour guide, Janet. We're gonna come back here later at the end of the video and show you all about the Johnny Bench Museum, but first, let's take a little tour around Binger, Oklahoma. Binger is located in Caddo County, Oklahoma, which is kind of in the southwestern part of the state, kind of in the central part as well. It's just west of Oklahoma City. The county of Caddo was organized in 1901 as part of the Oklahoma Territory. It was named after the Caddo tribe, and so that was organized 6 years before Oklahoma became a state in 1907. And 1901 is also when Binger was established, and it was named after Binger Herman, who was the commissioner of the U.S. Land Office, and the post office opened late in that 1901 year. In the next year, the railroad came through, 1902. It was open and running until 1939. The agricultural crops that were the kind of the main part of the economy were peanuts and cotton. The Caddo Nation has their headquarters located in Binger, and they have a heritage museum that opened about 20 years ago. The population increased pretty rapidly in the early 20th century up into the 800s, as you can see there. And then it held pretty steady in the not dropping below 700 until the 2010 census, but in the last census in 2020, it has really dropped off, losing a third of its population in just 10 years. There was a short novel called The Mound that was written by Howard Phillips Lovecraft, who was one of the kind of leading horror writers in the early 20th century. And this movie the book called The Mound was written in 1929, and it was set in the town of Binger, Oklahoma. We're going to talk about Johnny Bench here shortly. He was the most famous person from Binger, but another notable person is Verlin Thompson, who's an award-winning singer-songwriter, mostly in country music. He's played with the who's who of all country and kind of folk music singers, from Kenny Rogers to Jimmy Buffett, and even newer artists like Dierks Bentley. See, we entered the town hall, which is where the museum is located, and we walk in and you see everything to do with Johnny Bench, who was part of the Cincinnati Reds, where I grew up in Cincinnati, so seeing this was a pretty cool deal, all this memorabilia, like his high school and jacket and his gold gloves. And so I'll just give you I'll kind of talk through the tour a little bit. Janet was really nice to give me a long tour. The recording of the sound wasn't great, so I thought I'll just kind of walk you through just to see what there is here. Obviously, way better to see it in person, but this gives you a little bit of a taste. There's just memorabilia everywhere, and Janet and her husband they're just very passionate about history and Binger, and they're from there, their family's from there, and so they tell you all the history of not only Johnny Bench but the town. And so it's kind of cool to have that perspective. And most of this stuff is things that she has collected and put together, whether she's bought or made or put into frames herself, and just kind of a life of dedication to this museum. Johnny Bench, for those of you who don't know, was a Hall of Fame catcher. Some think he's the greatest catcher in the history of Major League Baseball. But one cool thing here she's pointing to, that was her son there with Johnny Bench. He ended up growing up to be a pretty good baseball player himself, and so she was telling me the story when Johnny Bench came back for a Johnny Bench Day, and her son was in the newspaper. So they have all these bats that are interesting, and she said that most of the time, these are almost like World Series rings where you only get them if you're part of the team or in the front office, and she was able to get a lot of them as gifts. And so it's cool. She's talking about all the different signatures. There's a lot of valuable artifacts there. The pinstripes here is kind of humorous because this was what I think Johnny Bench wore in his Hall of Fame induction. And if you look real close, the pinstripes are actually his name written down the pinstripes. It's pretty cool. This was one of my favorite parts of the tour, the Johnny Bench song. From Meade to Cooperstown, he played for the Reds every day. In the time $1 million deals, agents making owners squeal. He stayed to Cincinnati all the way. I love that song. That was a lot of fun to listen to. This was home plate from his last game in Cincinnati. I remember watching that as a kid. Great memory. World Series ring and high school ring side by side. She told me all about his, growing up there, and the husband would go hunting with them, and just all kinds of pictures growing up. Very interesting to see a museum like this dedicated to one person in this small town, and there's the statue, and that'll end our little trip through the museum. I want to thank Janet and her husband for taking time out of their weekend to open the museum for me. The museum is usually open Monday through Friday. It's in the city hall, so usually it's open and people can kind of just wander in and check things out. But I called yesterday knowing that it was going to be closed, and the city hall got me connected with Janet, and she was happy to come up and show me around. I showed you just a little bit. I was there for quite a while. Not only did her and her husband tell me about the Johnny Bench connections and the museum, I got to learn all about Binger and their family. And so it's one of the great things when you come to a small town. They're very proud of something like Johnny Bench being from here, and he's come back many times and he's donated to the community. So very cool thing. The husband told me that when he was a young child growing up here, the downtown area on the weekends would just be full of people, and just people everywhere. All the businesses would be open, and it's kind of sad when you go down the main street now and on a Saturday and there's nothing much going on. But it was kind of cool to get that connection with what it used to be with them. So once again, thanks a lot. Make sure if you're ever near Binger, Oklahoma, that you stop in, check things out, and definitely check out the Johnny Bench Baseball Museum.